With great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sue Robson. She's going to introduce herself more thoroughly, yeah, great to have Sue on the team, and she's going to start to share her knowledge now. So over to you, Sue.
Thanks, Marcus. Oh, really excited to be here. Excited to be back home. I consider Australia my home. I'm going to share with you my journey over the last few years. So you've got those who know me know my background, but those who haven't, Marcus asked me to share a bit of that so you know where I've come from and what I've been up to. Okay. Where did I start? I started in the UK. It's north of England accent you hear. With lots of other things mushed in by now. I went to university at Liverpool and did pure physiology. So I'm a physiologist by trade, and then worked in the medical school and was neurophysiologist, which I did a master's by research in dorsal root ganglion neurons. So a long way from science, sports science. I was an athlete at that stage and was running 800s and taking it fairly seriously in my latter years there. Sports science, I wasn't aware that it really existed when I first started at the university there, so we're talking quite a long time ago. I worked and changed from physiology into sports science just in my last year at Liverpool University. They helped me both financially and professionally to move fields, and that was a fantastic opportunity for me. And then I came over to Australia because I wanted to run, I wanted some sun, and I wanted to be outdoors, and the beach sounded good. So I came here for those reasons at 24. I landed in Brisbane and travelled south and got as far as Byron Bay, which is not very far down the coast. I thought this is pretty good. And my partner was in computer science, I was in sports science, and the university at Southern Cross had both of those, despite only having 5 departments at that stage. So we figured this was a good place to be. And so over the next about 10 years, I progressed and did a PhD in sports science physiology, looking at the effect of the menstrual cycle on athletic performance and looking at all the different hormones. I had the advantage of working with lots of different practitioners there in the strength field, the endurance field, as well as I was really interested in the anaerobic side for my personal reasons in 800s and things too. Over that time, gradually became a consultant to the IIS in that side of things, and worked with women in sport. People who may remember her, Wendy I in Perth in Western Australia, set up that piece that ended up becoming Australia-wide. Because of that work, and also with professional collaborations at the ski team in America, they were interested in somebody coming in with their women's alpine programming and setting up programming and things for them. And so I went over and was only meant to be there for 2 years, leading into the 2000 Games. 6 years later, having become their director of sports science and working across all of the alpine program, the cross-country program, across nutrition, physiology, sports science, etc., I gradually sort of became, I guess, more expert across the different areas of sports science and really interested in. We had, at that time, 6 years of data with the athletes, and for me, it was criminal not to use the data properly and not to be mining what happened 2 years ago, 3 years or 4 years in the last Olympic cycle versus this cycle. How do we get change? How do we understand that change? And how do we get that across the disciplines? If we get a blood test and we're looking at nutrition stuff and we're looking at body comps, how do we bring that all together so I can talk to those people, we can discuss it, we can see it live at the same time? So I started access databasing at that point. I started working with a programmer that was at the US Olympic Committee and had done some programming with them and setting up a database for the US ski team linked with that for their athletes. So that's where I first started working with databasing systems and trying to pull things and reports and pieces together. I went to the US for 2 years. 6 years in, I wanted to be back home, back here. And I came over back to Australia, had a child, so my daughter Kaylin, she's been big in some of my life decisions in being around in different countries, and started to work remotely with the US ski team, started to really develop their data systems. And then, because of Kaylin, I wanted to be around my family in the UK, and so for personal reasons I chose to head to the UK to do that. And then the opportunity came up just bang at the same time with Scotland and with the Scottish Institute of Sport. And so that's where I headed to join that team at just a really good time as they moved towards the Olympics in London, as they moved towards the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. We worked together, like kind of on quite a few things. We had a physiology department then of about 5 or 6 staff, and a very active medical, nutritional team that we were all integrating with. We've got the other departments you'd imagine, so strength and conditioning linking in, etc. First piece I tried to get, because all of their data was in separate on that little piece that Marcus showed. So how many of you have your data in under one person? So if they can't access it or tell you what that says, you don't have access to it. And so pretty much everything was sitting on individual practitioners' computers in Excel spreadsheets. And in their environment. So if they didn't email it, they didn't share it, there was no way of like kind of accessing and getting to it. So I started to develop over the first 2 years there very actively with Dr. Brian Walker, who was the head of medicine then, getting together with a blood database, pulling that together with a head of nutrition who's Irene, and pulling what is effectively a linked system for understanding anthro changes, physiology testing changes, and blood test changes, those 3 things. It was a system I'd already set up for the ski team, but in a slightly different way for the Institute. And so pulling that together and getting them to embrace what getting all the data in one place could do. And so that's how we moved forwards. And then we went to a place of, could we get all the data in one place? What are our requirements? And we actually started to outsource and figure out what are the needs going through to London, going through to Glasgow, that would help us embrace that movement forwards, and how can we really get use out of a system like that. And so through a scoping process with McLaren, I'll share a little bit more when we get to project management tomorrow. We used partners and started to work in Smartabase as a tool to do this. So what I wanted to share with you today, though, is why, as a physiologist, I've gone down this track. So I've given you a bit of the general background as when I was working with the ski team and trying to get data in the same place to look at it historically. So I could look at one Olympic cycle versus this upcoming, make better decisions on how I'm going to program for this athlete, this team, those coaches in that environment. What are we seeing on the slopes and the ice conditions? Is our training in the right place? How does that mean? What I'm going to show you as an example today is something I've been doing more recently, and it's a live contextual piece, and it's around working with athletes in a sort of daily monitoring environment to getting overviews of data over longer time, whether that's over monthly, whether that's over yearly, and starting to make better decisions around it. So our real goal through all of this piece for me has been trying to use the data we have much more effectively. So it can't just sit in a spreadsheet. It can't just show a graph of, say, X-Phys tests over a period of time. What else has been happening? How is the anthro changing? How are the performance markers changing? How can I visualize it? How can I make sense of that to advise a coach better, or have a discussion with S&C or nutrition on how we might manage it better and make a decision on it? Any system like this, and Marcus emphasized it, I'm going to re-emphasize it, and I'll re-emphasize it again tomorrow, is contingent on people. It's about people. It's the technology, yes, it needs to be good and it needs to bring the stuff together, but unless the people are actually using it as a tool to communicate better, not actually just relying on the computer to somehow miraculously come up with the answer, it's not going to. You are going to. Your discussions, your professional experience are going to come up with that answer. What Smartabase can do is help you have better discussions, be better informed when you have those discussions. So it's about empowering people. It's not about just the technology, it's about people. So there's 3 elements when you're going through and trying to set it up that I think really make the difference in whether something's successful or not. And that's people, process behind it, and then the technology itself that creates the overlay. If those first 2 things are not there, the technology isn't going to bring it together for you. It's not going to stick a plaster on and make the answers come. It's not going to tell you how to prioritise it. It's not going to tell you how to plan it. Your people do that. It makes that easier, it makes it faster, it makes it more powerful in terms of getting delivery around it. I'm going to put my ticks on. So planning becomes critical, and we'll talk about that tomorrow and how we can make that a little bit easier. But getting buy-in from the people, them feeling empowered in the process that it's theirs, it belongs to them, and then it meets their needs and that they get what they need out of it. They probably already know what that is, they just don't know how that system can do it, and they don't know how that can make it easier. Getting that to a place where they understand that at the outset and they actually own that, and it's their piece that you're working with them on, is critical to working through the next phases. The implementation and the reviewing are almost easy pieces if the first piece is done well with and as part of the people in the process. So all becomes really why a data management system? What's it underpinned by? The data management system probably won't do anything for you much if you don't have really good planning sitting around it too. And then the processes of going through rigorously, what are we doing? What are we doing to achieve? What objectives have we got? What does success look like? Do we understand what the goals are? Therefore, what is the activity? They all fall out of each other. If they don't exist, the technology won't create it for you. Then what are going to be the measures and monitors we're going to use to put in at the bottom end from all of these different areas? It might be from administration, sport managers, whether that's one sport and it's just one sport manager. It's just a layer of globalisation going out to larger sports, whether it's 1 or 2 disciplines or whether it's 8, 9 or 10 disciplines. Managers, head coaches. So from the planning stage, actually getting things into the system that'll help you be able to do things faster, easier. If you've got administration and you go through and all the athletes have to fill in their names and addresses and then their medical profile details, bits and pieces, they then go and see the physio and fill in their names, their addresses, their medical profile details, they then go and see S&C and they fill in their names, their addresses, a number of times if you go through those Excel spreadsheets that all the practitioners are getting everybody to fill in, the amount of duplication that we had in ski team system, Sports Scotland system, quite sure a lot of your environment system of being asked the same question again and again and again. And this removes all of that. So from the athlete side, much quicker. But basically the power is around integration, getting reports out of it, getting triggers, alerts. I'm going to show you an example with those, being able to track data over time and make better decisions. And those decisions can be made quickly on the ground. I'll show you an example from day to day, or they can be made, as in here, when we're doing long-term changes through a year and then going to 4-year planning, that we look at it, we review it, we see objective data, we make changes, and then we go back through and we replan again. And we do that from the lessons we've learned. We don't do that because I think so. Or, you know, my data says this and yours said that, and then you come to an opinion rather than actually being properly able to look at the relationships and see what has been influencing the outcomes. So one of the biggies to be able to do any of that, you can't do it if it's not in one place. You can't do it if it's not in a common environment so you can run comparisons and pull things out from it. And so one of the critical pieces in both of those that I've described to you that I've worked in has been about pulling pieces into a common environment. It doesn't always have to be all of the detail from everything. It can be key components, or it can be critical pieces to at least create a flag or a relationship between different pieces so that you can now see all 3, 4, 5, 6 or whatever it is at the same time to see what's happening. At the end of the day, we're humans, and there's only so many pieces, if we don't bring them together, that we can get our head around. So unless you can kind of somehow visualize it and interact with it, it's very difficult to achieve that. So the goal, the challenge, good planning. So I'm just repeating here. Headline objectives, those things need to drive whatever you're doing, priorities. They create your measurements. So what do I need to put into a Smartabase form? It should come out of those things up above. Communication and then reporting, measuring and communicating, creating automations, reporting and discussing. All this is very flat and words, so I'm going to take you to more of a real life example. These are all the things that you might be familiar with, depending on your environment. Whether you're within a sport, you would see most of those things. So if you're just in rugby, just in swimming, just in whatever the sport may be, you would be familiar with most of the things on the left-hand side there. If you're in most high-end sport environments now, you'll also be familiar with a lot of these. In Scotland, we had 37 sports multiplied by all of these. All of those things pretty much multiply, and so an ability somehow to conceptualise those things is quite challenging. How do we make them into influence decisions? So, real example. As a physiologist, one of the things that I've been really interested in and used a lot, like kind of with cross-country teams, with as a function of getting performance benefit. With alpine teams, actually just as a function, we had to go to altitude to do our training, and that was just a big influence on how it affected the athletes and what they went through, going up and going down and going up and going down. In Sport Scotland, altitude's critical for some of our athletes preparing for competition and using that as a tool. And so it's a nice physiology example that I've used Smartabase for across multidisciplines to really help see what's going on. This is a sort of typical planning piece that you might have with an athlete. It might be track and field, it could be those sorts of athletes who are using altitude to benefit. And these are the sort of things that typically plan with a coach. So we might be having them setting up their goals that they want their athlete to achieve. Now that might be stride lengths or stroke efficiencies, it might be aerobic efficiency around that. So what are their main goals? Like, when are they planning to make changes to that program? So if X happens, might we do Y or might we do Z? A lot of the coaches I work with get worried about planning in case you're going to hold them to it and they're not able to change it. And so having them have the confidence that it's going to change, something will change, but understanding where you're heading, if I know the direction you're going in, I can help you with it more. So getting these sort of down and then understanding, okay, what we do this year is going to influence next year. So if you've got an athlete going to altitude for the first time this year, you're probably not going to do that the immediate year prior to games if you don't know how they're going to respond to it. Their first time up, they're going to respond differently to the second time up. they'll get a pattern, so you'll start to understand how they adapt in the first few days, how they adapt, are they a responder, a non-responder after 10, 14, 21 or so days. What will we do the next time? Will we use a tent to pre-acclimatise? Will we not? Did that help? Does it not help? There's a lot of decisions there before we even go up. What's their iron status like? Are they compromised? Do we need to have a nutritional plan in there first? And so right up front, there's usually a lot of things that go in before altitude. I used it deliberately because it has a lot of underpinning things. If they've got anything in there that's compromising them medically, then we would choose not to go until a later stage. And so consequently, when those bloods come back, and we deliberately do it a certain number of weeks out, so we have the information before we go into camp, we've got time to adjust things. Okay, are they now ready? If they're not, we'd make a decision that they wouldn't go until the next phase. And so all that data is constantly informing decisions on what we do and when we do it. So mixture across all these different pieces of sports science, across the athlete, across the coach. Athletes filling in a diary, they might start to show signs of becoming sick, etc. So all of this, how it used to sit, when we used to send athletes and like kind of go up with them and track the markers, etc., is a challenge. Like to get that together. Like I can remember digging it off S&C coaches and getting it from and having the group meetings of 10 people around the table and right, are we ready with this? That's invaluable discussion time, but there's a lot of time there wasted on everybody getting everybody else up to scratch. So can we do it better? I think we can. So doing altitude better. It's the same plan. It's not any different. I don't do the plan any different since I've had Smartabase, but we go about the collection and the discussions differently since we've had Smartabase. And so having this piece, you'll now see a couple of extra columns in here that start to say that it's, so SB stands for Smartabase, and sometimes there's an app in there and sometimes there's a PC. So what I'm going to show you is there might be a year plan, and I've blocked out names and things like and we might be putting in a plan of what they're doing, when they're going to go up to altitude, when they're travelling, which country they might be in. I can track in the year planner responses to pieces on that. So generally speaking, the coach and the sport do the planning around it in our environment. And then we go about doing it. So I've got ticks all across the way for the athlete on diarying, and ticks all across the way you see there for HRV, which is heart rate variability, which is an analysis of their responses to the training that they're doing. So what's that look like for an athlete? A typical day for an athlete doing this kite to feedback in Smartabase, they might wake up, they turn on their phone, and you're going to hear about APIs and apps later on. This one has an app linked to the telephone that actually tells the athlete when they wake up, they literally just pop on the band, click onto the phone, it tells them when to stand up, when to lie back down, it beeps, they click save. As soon as they click save, that's all on their telephone, it sends that information into Smartabase. So they get up and go about the business and go off to training then. They might add a quick comment in there. So they go ahead and go on to training. Okay. So this is just, I wanted to give you an image of the diaries. A lot of you will have seen and used similar things yourself. The contents, I'll let it be blurred. It's not particularly important. What they see on their phone is just quick bullet points that they click into and save. So in the athlete's environment, they get immediate feedback on their own pieces. So they see graphs, they see if they're recording weight, they'll see that tracked, they'll see how their training load's going. So immediately they see where yesterday is compared with today. it was just to find a view of the HRV analysis. The link's not clicked in, it's fine. So the physiologist, after the athlete clicks save, that's pretty much on the day piece where I'd got to. When they click that, an alert goes out to the physiologist, and they get an email saying that Jemima has filled in their diary, like ready, the HRV is ready for your feedback. They immediately go into Smartabase, go into that piece, do the HRV analysis, and it was just that image. So it's fairly complicated, like, analysis system that they're going through, figuring out, okay, what responses, what do I know is normal for the athlete on, like, kind of in this period of training. They go in and they create a very simple comments, flags and information back to the athlete and to the coach, so that they can get an immediate piece, particularly in an altitude environment, to give them feedback on how hard to do. That's so important in the first 6 days of training. We're now in a place that can be done remotely, so the physiologist doesn't need to be there, that they can actually do those pieces of feedback in a remote environment. And so some of the data collection's done and monitoring on site, and some of this is done from a remote place. And by using an API like that and linking in, you get that immediacy of feedback. The other piece that's linking on there is feedback in through to the coach too. So while the athlete's doing this, they go off and they might not only do their piece of training today, they might see the physio in the afternoon, they do a piece of S&C, they've got some comments from the physio. You might have somebody that's got, like, kind of sore foot through this. They've got a restriction in the training that S&C need to know about. So as soon as that's entered in, there's a comm sheet created as a simple event page that brings together physiotherapy, S&C, athlete diary, and that we have the team that's working with that athlete have visibility. If there's a flag that creates a red, whoever needs to know gets an alarm, or the coach gets an oversight of all of it. So the coach, in a live circumstance, can get a feedback of the planning that they've put in, what's actually happening. They get flags on the different pieces that are running through, whether these people are available or not for training, total distance that's been done. This particular example is pulled from swimming, total load and things on there. So in one nice dashboard, they can see, like, kind of what's been going on for the last few days. You can also see what's been going on in physiotherapy, what's been going on in training, what's been going on in nutrition. So in a quick overview for the week, you can get quite a lot of nice information easily, quickly, without doing anything. Just by virtue of people have done their job and filled in the information, clicked save, that form creates. We get somebody just to basically save the form. There's no actual data entry on that form at all on a fixed day in the week. So, like on a Sunday, they just get pushed through. It can be done by group data entry across the team. And suddenly, the coach has all the information that they need across the last week or 2 weeks, depending on how you've set the form up. A nice example for what I talked to you about for what I used to run in access databases around bloods and anthro and nutrition. That like critical 3 disciplines tends to be quite instrumental in making decisions around nutrition, fatigue, medical circumstances linked with training, etc. Just wanted to share blood sampling is quite easily done in the Smartabase environment. It's an example that you can get APIs linked into, so it can be either done through a remote access, it can be done through emails, or it can be done through software technology. So in this case, it's an email that's sent through from a lab, and so that use of APIs is quite flexible, and there's a bit of work in a session that we've got, I think it's tomorrow, on an API. Is it tomorrow? Yeah, on APIs, showing you the different ways that they can be used. So effectively, a remote or external circumstance can send information, and that can be logged into Smartabase, and the first you then know about it is actually the alert to tell you. So just like the diary, you're getting an alert telling you this information's now in the system, and so you can go ahead then and create. So that's just what an API is. It often gets said, and I didn't know for a long time, what is an API? It's an application program interface. It's basically just linking two pieces of hard or software together so that they can talk. And Smartabase allows information to flow in both directions, which makes it quite unique that you can send information out and you can also get information in and collate it. Then in one click, you can generate a report. So going from getting a set of information in, getting an alert, it then can amalgamate the information from several places, produce a report. Then your job as a physiologist for me, or linking with the medical, is purely to screen that and say, right, what do I want to tell the coach and the athlete? And for us, how we've been working in Scotland recently is we actually share that amongst the three people, so nutrition, medical, physiology. And then if there's any flags on there, we discuss it. So again, I emphasise it's actually about the people. It's not about the technology making decisions. It's actually the physiologists still making decisions, the medics saying, actually, you know what, I think this is a little bit, and I would recommend you do this. And the nutritionist is saying, you know, with their past history on ferritins and how they're responding right now, I would recommend this. And then you can come to a collective decision. So it really embraces bringing people together to have those conversations. I find that people, when they work with the system to begin with, or they're first coming in, they're nervous it's going to take that away somehow, that somehow the system is going to make the decision. The system doesn't make the decision, the people make the decision. The system helps inform those discussions and the decision and make it more visible to them. That's not all. So we can learn and talk more, but it also allows sort of actions around it and the sharing of those bits of actions. And so the discussions through the various groups, the athlete themselves and the coach, I put ... because it might be the coach, and you know what? I really want to do 2 sets of altitude or 3 sets of altitude. We want to use it for speed instead of like kind of the conditioning side of things. How do we do that? Do we do that with this? Well, it might be that there's been a poor response. It might be that ferritins have been repetitively low and we know there's a challenge there. And so having that discussion to get the best outcome for that athlete with that information between us, we can kind of make that plan together. And is it a smart decision? Is it a compromising decision? What's the pros and cons associated with it? Also, the piece can run prescriptions, and it can easily bring the information in. It can send those pieces out. It can bring together historical understanding so that now as we go through, you've done that for 1 year, we're going into our next year. So the same plan looking at the next year, are we going to do it the same? Would we put the tent in the same place? Has this athlete responded better when they've had the tent in there? You know what, it didn't really make that much difference whatsoever. So, right, instead of compromised training for another 3 weeks, let's just go straight into altitude. Or it might be a different decision around that. But unless you've actually collected the information and seen it and discussed it, you can't quite get there. You're kind of going, well, I think, rather than, you know, we know now that this is the response in that way. We're confident we can do it in this direction. That fits with your training plan. Let's move that way instead of the way we did it last year. And then again, track. And so that piece then starts to lead to much better... I don't know what I just did there. Much better decisions around a circumstance. So... we'll just let it have its little thing. I'm pretty much through for today. Where I wanted to take you tomorrow is into a place around... I've been working in Smartabase now for, I think, 4.5, four confirmation from the back, 4.5 years. I've been working in databases for an additional 4 years on that, trying to get this sort of working together. We're now in a place where quite a few people who've gone through with these pieces are now also embracing and doing. People who have worked with and collaborated with, so Andrew Berry's in here, and he's just moved over to Doha and is working in Smartabase again. I've got another couple of colleagues who've changed sports recently or environments and are now in a position, having used this and used it as a tool. It's, how do I do that without it? Like, I need to get my new organisation to do this, because it comes such a backbone to how you make decisions and be confident in the decisions that you're making, and how you embrace the team of people around that decision making, that it becomes critical to that. And so where I'll take you from today in terms of just an example of why it's become so important to me, enough to, for me, all the way through my career, sharing and making things and getting them done better has been really important to me in what's integral in terms of working and doing things. And so now to have this opportunity to actually work in one of the key areas that's made that difference and enabled that to happen is so exciting. And so really looking forward to sort of driving this further. In particular, this is like the epitome of being able to share. I've kind of also been on Marcus's back. We really need a forum and be able to talk and not reinvent the wheel, to be able to, I mean, a lot of what we do, it's not actual rocket science. Some of the forms, you know, it's like it's names and addresses. Where systems are vulnerable is where they're not risk managed well. If we don't understand what happens when these people move on, how do we put pieces in place around our systems, our understanding of our athletes and coaches, and around this new technology to make sure that it is moving upwards and forwards to that, like, kind of next point. And so they become very critical. And so rather than have to everybody do it all again, quite happy to share. We've made mistakes. We started quite simply. We probably did a good job of our initial planning and things. We definitely could have done our administration up front a heck of a lot better than we did. We didn't do that until year 2. Should have been year 1. So if I can share some of the things that we've learned along our way, and you guys can share with each other and with me too, please. I'm always learning as well, because there's so many ways to skin a cat, and it's if we get sight of other ways of doing things, it's got to make us better when we do try again. And so for me, it's kind of continually trying to get better and make those decisions and those pieces better, because sports science is about those things. So I'll round up for today, and I will be around for the rest of today and all of tomorrow and tomorrow night. So it'll be really nice. Please nudge me, catch up with me. If we don't get to speak personally, but you'd like some information from me, then, and to share some time, like even if it's Skype time, you can get my email. It'll be available on the site and happily shared around here. It's just the normal Fusion Sport email. And so, yeah, looking forward to collaborating and partnering with a lot of people.